Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to the James Bond Complex podcast, the show where we discuss, rejoice, and analyze in the entire James Bond franchise in all of its shapes and forms, from Fleming to the films, and of course everything in between. Ooh.
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 I could not have continued without that third ooh. Otherwise, I would have added a ooh.
Yes.
So we are three of us this evening. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Edgar.
Go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
My name is Jason Kim, your international man of mystery.
And I'm Emery.
You are Emery, and the other one is Jason. Matt is not here this evening. He is on a mission doing something at home. So we have a special episode. The topic we're going to do this week is something that us three tend to talk about a little bit off mic every once in a while. Not to say that we're experts in this subject matter, but we do have a particular penchant or a penchant, if you're from the States, for wristwatches. Again, we're not experts, but it is a subject that interests us. We do a little bit of reading, we do a little bit of YouTubing, we do a little bit of this and that.
We do a little
buy
bit
some things.
Yeah, we do a little bit of purchasing as well too.
A little bit of purchasing. But we'll get to those, Jason. We'll get to those bad boys. So, just to explain what the main event this evening is, because the early conversations about, well, what would a wristwatch episode be for the James Bond complex? It was a little bit nebulous, and it got a little bit warmer, and last week we sort of agreed on something slightly outside the box. Is that this episode is going to be some sort of a fantasy James Bond wristwatch draft.
Ba-ba-ba-ba.
And our dear co-host Edgar Chaput is Roger Goodell himself tonight.
Yeah,
If
he's
I need to be
commissioner.
Roger Goodell,
Commissioner Edgar Chaput.
if I'd like to think I'm much more debonair than Roger Goodell, although I don't think I could manage something as sophisticated and complicated as the National Football League. So look, basically what we're going to do is there's an ill-defined Bond 26 coming up in our imaginations. The details are hazy, but the point is there's a new James Bond movie, and James Bond, the leading lady, and the Bond villain all need a wristwatch. So what we're going to do this evening is, per character, we'll start with leading lady, then go to Bond villain, and we'll save the bad boy for last, James Bond. Each of those characters, we are going to individually each draft a wristwatch for those three characters. So you theoretically should get to know 9 watches in total tonight. I will draft 3, Emery will draft 3, and Jason will draft 3. But maybe before we get to that, because I know Jason he's just so excited about something. You mentioned purchases. We do some purchasing sometimes. I've been poor for about a year. So 2022, from January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022, there will have been 0 wristwatch purchases from me. But you made some purchases recently. What's going on there, Jason?
I did. Let me put on my white gloves.
Oh, of course.
Did you really
yes.
did the gloves come
Of
with
course.
the watch, or are those a personal purchase?
These are personal, or they're free. So I got my white gloves on, and then so recently I bought the Hamilton PSR, which was shown in Live and Let Die. So it's $9.19.
Oh my goodness! Is this a reissue, or what's the story here?
So the Hamilton PSR, well, it's not. Pulsar has been sold off to Seiko since, but Hamilton has reissued the first original digital watch that was made in like late 69 or 70, 71. They re-released it in 2020, and Kyle Barbeau of Easy Smiles Expensive Watches is one of the first people I know who bought it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the fence for it about a while, and then if you guys have seen my recent travel photos, I was in New York one week. The week after, I was in the Big Easy down in New Orleans, and scattered my Live and Let Die locations in both places. Jamaica's the only thing I have left. So in order to kind of bring the entire Live and Let Die journey to full circle before the 50th anniversary next year, I decided to buy the Hamilton Pulsar watch.
And what are your, now I've never seen one in person. What are your first impressions?
It's very light. It's surprisingly very light. It's very simple and it's very unique is why I bought it. Because like me, sometimes I like to be very most people know I'm a very unorthodox person as a whole. I'm a very unorthodox person in general. So I have a lot of diver watches. This is my second Hamilton after my Hamilton GMT Auto, which I have right here. So I replicated the Spectre and like the Spectre, it's a bi-directional bezel with the GMT clock in the middle. So I've become a sorry, Bond fans, I'm not an Omega person. Hamilton's my go-to. And the second reason why I bought the Hamilton PSR is a Korean American actor named Daniel Henney. He's a very popular actor in Korea right now, and he himself is a Hamilton ambassador, and he wore the exact Hamilton PSR watch in this new action movie called Confidential Assignment. So I enjoy that movie. I enjoy Live and Let Die, so easy decision.
Sounds like something James Bond often goes on, confidential assignments.
Yes.
It's very James Bond.
And you guys know I go on plenty of confidential assignments as well too.
Mm. Just, I know this has nothing to do with James Bond, but correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. Did Pulsar or Hamilton, did they not release some sort of variation on the Pulsar for the latest Matrix movie a year ago? Was that them?
Yes, so the same watch, but Hamilton re-released it for the terrible Matrix Resurrection movie. For our dear listeners, do not watch that movie, by the way.
All right.
So they re-released that watch in a black strap, all black, but the numbering is in green. The numbering's in green, just like the Matrix code is.
Right.
I know Hamilton like to associate themselves with movies quite a lot.
They do, because I know like the Men in Black characters, like you remember when Will Smith is issued his black suit and the watch, that's a Hamilton. It was featured in Interstellar, both the Murphy watch as well as the watch that Matthew McConaughey wears in space, when he goes on a space adventure. What else has been
when he goes on a space adventure.
Jeffrey Wright and Giancarlo Gianni both wear Hamilton's in Quantum of Solace. Giancarlo Gianni, which is Rene Mathis, he wears the Hamilton Field khaki watch, which is a very popular model, and Harrison Ford also wore it in a very Bond-related movie called Force 10 from Navarone, because it was a World War II issue. It's a World War II based movie, and so Hamilton was the World War II field watch supplier to the U.S. troops, and that's been their pride and joy since. And so that's the exact model.
By this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, finish your thought there, Jason.
So that World War II model is the exact model that Jeffrey Wright wears in. Not Jeffrey Wright. Rene Mathis wears in Quantum of Solace. Jeffrey Wright wears a Flight Auto, so it's like a really cool chronograph watch, similar. So it's a pilot's watch in Quantum of Solace, but he reverts to Omega in No Time to Die. And Primo, or I like to call him Cyclops, wears Hamilton Auto Scuba Diver watch, which is a really cool watch, and Bud West wears one, and the bad guy from Aquaman wears the same one too. I forget his name, but
I hope it's a diver watch. He's a character in Aquaman.
So you're saying, sorry to interrupt your thought, but to say what you were saying.
No, I interrupted you. I interrupted you, actually. No, it was just, correct me if I'm wrong, Hamilton is no longer strictly an American brand. They were bought out by the Swiss at some point a few years ago, were they not? The heritage is American, but...
Yeah, something along those lines. Like, I don't know the full acquisition history myself, but like they always advertise like American heritage, Swiss made, like Swiss quality or whatever you want to do it.
Right. Well, I mean, the Swiss made, I think even one of the brands I picked a given brand that I will reveal in due time for its particular country of origin, but when you go to the site, that's we're proudly this, by the way, we make them in Switzerland. So it's I think a lot of these brands rely on some Swiss watches.
So
Emery,
yeah,
how's your Rolex GMT?
Non-existent. No, I'm a Casio guy. You know that. I've got the Casio Duro on now with one of my Barton straps that I just got, and like I'm actually thinking the Hamilton Field Khaki was one of those watches that I've kind of got on my radar for a while because I'm looking for. Like I'll be honest, when the Swatch Moon Swatch came out, I was like, ooh, that's an affordable chronograph that's got the Omega Nemo and the Omega, name on it. That's
get it right, please.
Decent quality. David just showed a picture. He's got one. I don't know which one he's got. I think it's the Neptune, not one of the ones. Like I'll be honest, it's gonna have to be like one of those classic, more simpler colors and not some of the wild Swatch stuff. But like either a chronograph or something really basic, simple that I can throw a NATO strap or a canvas strap on is what I'm looking at as a next future acquisition.
Well, they're not limited, despite the hoopla we noticed this past spring, as well as the lineups I myself witnessed outside the downtown Swatch store. They're not limited. It's not like, we only made 1,000. Like you can buy. I mean,
you can go buy a brand new one in store now if you wanted to, but people are still selling them on Facebook Marketplace at twice the price because they still think that they're getting them at a premium because they were a limited. They're not a limited edition. They're still being produced. You can get them brand new anywhere. Don't buy them off Facebook for $600.
No.
That's the world we live
But
in.
I do. I mean, Emery, you're a history buff like myself in the Midwest, so I mean, you can't go wrong with either choices. But I would recommend join the Hamilton Club and get the Field Khaki watch.
I'll wait till Her Majesty's government or His Majesty's government start paying me a little more, and then I'll look into that. Why don't we get the draft going with our first round, which we had mentioned earlier was. Did we mention it yet? No. The first round being leading ladies. And I believe that the first pick goes to Mr. Kim.
So with the first pick of the 2022 the James Bond Complex watch draft, the first pick will be the Hamilton Jazzmaster Lady Auto for my leading lady.
Oh, I like the Jazzmaster. Which one again?
The Jazzmaster Lady Auto.
Lady Auto.
So it's like a pink gold strap and die.
I know the Jazzmaster is a pretty. The Jazzmaster has a pretty extensive history, but this is a handsome little devil.
So
elegant to it.
So the reason why I chose this watch was not because it could run a 40-yard dash in 2 seconds or something like that, but I'm just playing, guys. But because I want my leading lady to be a mix of a romantic interest and a femme fatale, someone that. So I was thinking, I'm not saying cast this person specifically, but I was thinking, what would Jodie Comer wear? And I thought, and that was my choice.
Why is that something that I was going to wait for Vanessa Kirby or?
Hey, speaking of which, I actually just bought the tickets to Jodie Comer's Broadway play in May.
Oh, nice.
So there you go. So just to put the ribbon on the topic.
Nice. Well, it's a very nice choice. It's certainly very look. It was drafted for the leading ladies, so obviously it's going to be a very ladylike watch. No, it's a very handsome choice. I like what you did there. I like what you did there quite a bit. And the Jazzmaster, that's a name you hear about quite a bit when you sort of browse the watch aficionado world. You really are you are like Mr. Hamilton. I know the James Bond Complex is not sponsored by Hamilton this week, but
we could be Hamilton.
We could be almost.
Yeah.
I have a PayPal account.
Didn't Hamilton get killed in New Orleans, where I just returned from?
Oh, there you go. Even the character with the watch's name.
I mean, I still remember when I posted the picture of me posing where Agent Hamilton and what's the other Strutter stand
Strutter.
David
Bond.
David Saritsky commented on my photo. He's like, "Hey, aren't you too far away from the fire hydrant?" And then he trolled me with a comment. And then I responded to David, "Maybe that's why I'm still alive, because the assassin only goes to that one specific pole, not the second pole."
Right. Interesting. Do you have anything else to add about? I like the pick. I think it's very elegant. I think it's really, my goodness, excuse me. I think it's very classy. It's certainly very, very ladylike. I went in a slightly different direction, but
Are you the second overall pick?
You are the second pick.
I am the
Edgar.
second overall pick. So my it's
I
funny
have
when
I have one more summary before I let the second overall pick go to you, Edgar.
You have another one?
I just have one final statement before
Sure, please. Well, by all means, let it all out.
I hope you're a better GM than Mike Mayock of the Raiders.
Emery, you're editing this episode? Cut that trash. Cut that trash. So when I did this, it's funny. Some listeners may recall that at this point, it might have been as long ago as 3 years ago, me and Matt recorded an episode where we sort of fantasized about our fictional Bond 26s, and it was we had a good time doing that episode. We came up with plots and casting ideas and character names, and there was the germination of doing fictional Bond 27s. We never got around to doing it, but some of the ideas of my Bond 27 had always stayed in the back of my mind. So there's a bit of story to my leading lady. My pick is I'm going to say it, then I'll go grab my image. I'm going a little bit big, but I'll explain why. I'm going with the Grand Seiko Spring Drive Snowflake SBGA 211. Let me go get a picture.
I think we should be good. But beautiful watch, Edgar. Grand Seiko, yeah.
Well, it's a little bit like your Jazzmaster Auto in the fact that it's a lot of white. But of course, I'm a little bit like you, Jason. I think you're a bit of a Seiko disciple, as am I. But of course, Grand Seiko is the other maison that's under the Seiko brand, but it's more higher end watches. This is a titanium watch, so it's a little bit more resistant to scratches. It's also lighter. It's an unobtrusive look. If you observe a little bit more closely, here's another one for you guys. If you observe a little bit more closely, if you zoom in on that, the reason why it's called the snowflake is because there's a pattern.
Oh, wow.
Yes, there's a work, and it's supposed to mirror essentially how light will reflect snow when it's deposited on the ground, but unsullied. And it's the spring drive technology, for maybe the listeners who don't know, and I won't want to bore them to death too much. And I'm not a mechanic, so this is going to be a drive-by explanation. But what Grand Seiko did, and it's patented, no one else can do this, at least they can't call it spring drive, is it's an automatic watch. So there's a mechanism, there's a router, there are bridges, there are wheels in it, there's an escapement in it. But the regulation for the accuracy is actually quartz. So it's a mixture of the two. So if you go onto YouTube and you search for any video that talks about spring drive, one of the things you'll notice is that because the quartz regulation of the accuracy is so fine, to the naked eye, the seconds hand sweeps. It's like a hot knife through butter.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, it's ticking. Technically, it's ticking, but it's
a clean movement.
It's so fast, we can't see that it's ticking. To our eyes, it's just whoop. And so my leading lady wears this because in my Bond 27, she works for the villain. She's some sort of a plant science technician. I won't get into the plot of my Bond 27. And anyways, when I saw the trailer for No Time to Die and saw that they were going to use the garden of the Poison Garden. I said, well, there goes my Bond 27 plot. But she works for the villain, and they're working, and she started with a Seiko 5, which is like $100 watch, $150 watch. But when the villain is so impressed with her work, says, my dear, you like Seiko. Well, here's a real Seiko. So he gifts her that for her good work. Grand Seiko. So that's my pick for my leading lady in the Bond 27 that I will never reveal.
I went a similar route for my pick, since I've got the third pick of this round. I kind of imagined who is the leading lady, and rather than go with, MI6 operative or CIA operative, I kind of dialed it back a little bit. And initially I thought of, well, what would Moneypenny as a civil servant wear? And then I thought of, what's the most kind of accessible for everyone, but most practical kind of luxury accessory that today's modern woman would look into. And I thought immediately of, well, what does my wife want? Because she's a civil servant. She's got a decent enough salary that she can afford certain things. And she's got the most recent iPhone. So I went immediately to the Apple Watch Series 8.
Oh, wow. I did not see this coming at all.
See? Yeah. I kept that as a wild card because I knew that this would be kind of like one of those out of the blue, like, what are you doing with this? So a smartwatch, the most recent one, it goes for about $1,000. I'm not going to put it on the chat because I think we all know what an an Apple Watch looks like. It's a 41 millimeter, so it's kind of large enough, but I mean, that's kind of the format they come in. And it's kind of in that price range where it's still a luxury item without being too fancy. It's a stainless steel case. This one, the one I've chosen, is the gold stainless steel case, so there is the gold element of it because, I mean, it's Bond, you got to have a little bit of gold. The options of being, of course, that you can have it with different bands. If you go on to the Apple Watch website, you do have the studio where you can actually build your own watch. So you can have the options that you'd want. And so for this leading lady, I've decided on the Apple Watch Series 8 in the 41 millimeter gold stainless steel case with elderberry sport band. But you can have them with leather bands. You could have them with, there's kind of a rope textured band as well. So I wanted to kind of go, and I don't want to use this term, but basic bitch. Like, this is like pumpkin spice latte in one hand with the Apple Watch with the, iPhone 14 in her hand.
And dresses like Han Solo in the fall.
Yeah, exactly. Multiple layers of beige.
That's interesting. No, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I was going to just say, since Emery just completed the final pick of this draft, why don't we let him go first in the second round?
That's very polite of you, Jason. I just want to say, I'm looking at the Apple Watch Series 8 Gold, and where did I put it? There I put it. It's interesting. You know what? That is not at all what I have in my mind when I think of an Apple Watch. I will give them credit where credit is due. They did put a minimal amount of effort into making it sort of look like an old school watch. Obviously, it's a digital screen and you can text and do whatever, but when I just look at it from a side, this one seems to have a bit of a mesh bracelet going on there.
There is a Milanese
Yeah, there are.
There is that option for this one, and they have leather as well. So I mean, it's versatile enough, and there's a lot of aftermarket companies that make the Apple Watch bands too, so that there's the options are endless for it. It's almost like a more modern, more connected version of a G-Shock. The G-Shock was kind of like the iconic digital watch for a lot of people, and it did a lot of things, and it was like the Iron Man watches and things like that. People were really into them for sport. I mean, this is a sports watch, but it's also a high price luxury item.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree. My dad tried to get an Apple Watch, but then he doesn't like iPhones, so I got him a Samsung watch at the time. So
Interesting. No, it's you caught us off guard, man. I
Yeah,
did
you
not see
caught.
that coming at all. I'm like, we're gonna go old school. We're gonna be talking about mechanical watches. This guy's like, I'm gonna do an Apple Watch Gold. But hey, it makes sense. If she's a if your leading lady's a civil servant, there's some logic to this.
My three picks really touch on very different types of watches. So the mechanical and like vintage and old school and stuff.
Mhm.
We'll see that as the draft progresses.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. Do we want to do it snake style? And Emery, do you want to start us off with the villain?
Let's go ahead with that. My pick for the villain is
What's coming up here? What's he gonna
the Hublot MP05 LaFerrari,
What
the
hell?
Tourbillon Black DLC MP05, and I will put that in the chat. This was
Please
a
do.
watch that was created specifically for owners of the LaFerrari Ferrari.
What in
It's
the world?
currently selling on the used market for somewhere around $300,000. It is probably the most overcomplicated watch that you have seen. Almost as complicated as a famous Richard Mille clock in Quebec City.
Oh, jeez. Yeah,
That is completely insane.
that is insane. Yo, like I love the mechanics. So is that like supposed to be a V8 or V12 engine?
That's supposed to be modeled after the well, I'm assuming it's a V8, just
Oh yeah,
kind
because
of
it's a
by the rollers, but at the
but it's
same
also
time.
it's a LaFerrari. LaFerrari, I believe, was a V8. Which was an awesome car, by the way.
So this is a very. I'm assuming that the Bond
Oh no,
is going to be extremely fanciful, and so this
Oh,
is
it's a-
it's an odd
it's a-
design for a case as well.
that's a V12. My bad. But no, it's a
Does this thing look okay? So that's what it looks like from the side. My,
God. How do you wear this shit?
I
there's a
think you
display
wear
case
it not
back.
very often.
I mean, like, how do you put it on your wrist? Is my question.
Because initially I was looking for a particular watch, and me and Edgar we had talked about it, and you had showed we had kind of
Yo, this is pretty badass. I do like it.
this is completely insane. I mean, hey,
And let me know.
I'm glad I've got good picks, and this is kind of where I had that confidence. Like no one is gonna pick this stuff.
I mean, I think this for our dear listeners, this is why what makes the James Bond complex so special is all four of us have very different personalities, and I highly guarantee none of us are gonna pick the same picks.
if it keeps up with this logic, no one's going to pick the same thing. The funny thing about Hublot, though, is Hublot, and you mentioned Richard Mille a few moments ago because of that clock next to the city hall where you live. The funny thing about Hublot is that it seems to be lumped in a similar category as Richard Mille in the sense that it's very ostentatious. It's extremely. I mean, Hublot is not as expensive as Richard Mille, but Hublot watches are not cheap, and they're often lambasted for those very reasons. They're a little bit gaudy, they're a little bit gauche, and they're overpriced. But there is some visual. I mean, there's visual whiz-paw to this. It looks like a motor. It looks like you're wearing a motor on your wrist. It's quite. What does your villain do?
I don't know yet. I didn't cast it as much as backwards, but I figured that he was going to be overly eccentric, and he needed a watch that kind of matched the personality of. I had in mind like an Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, multi-billionaire, not necessarily buying up social media like an Elliot Carver, but eccentric enough that he needs to show off his wealth. There is one other version of this watch that is even more ostentatious, and there is a sapphire version of it, and it is completely encased in glass. It's you can see through the entire thing, but it's about twice the price, if not more.
So let me I'll just refinance my house to purchase one of these.
Are you suggesting that price is a concern for your Bond villain, Emery?
No, not at all, not at all. It's just that this is the more conservative option, because I mean, if you have this watch, you probably have the car or something similar to go with it. So anyway,
Your villain also needs to still have some money to make that space laser. So.
Yeah,
exactly. But he could just buy and sell some shares of Twitter, and not Twitter, no.
Yeah, maybe not these days. You're a little bit, just a couple weeks too late. But this is, I'm looking at the dial. So the minutes are the hours and minutes. I have no idea how.
And then
I'm
on
gonna
the
have to YouTube
left
this. I
is
don't understand how this works.
on the left.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand. On the left, you've got
You
because
got the
it's very hard.
power. You got the power reserve on the left,
Yeah.
or what
I
I
don't
think
know
is.
what those numbers are because you've got like the top number and the bottom number. Like the hours and minutes, I can understand, but there's power and then reserve. So I don't know if
Or
it's.
is that the second? Is that the seconds? I think. So you
I'm
see.
assuming.
So what I'm reading this as is you read the time from the right side, but on the left side, you have the seconds and how much time you have left. So that's why it's the power reserve.
But then
That's
there's a middle dial at the bottom right under the Hublot logo.
Yeah.
So I think that
What
would be
is
the
that?
seconds.
oh,
and
never mind. I completely
No
missed
idea
that.
what's on the left.
Does
Or
it?
maybe it's power reserve like hours and minutes.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Actually, if you read, guys, if you read the fine print, this is not. I mean, it's a mechanical wash, but it's not. It's not a wind up or an automatic. You have to put gasoline in it for it to work.
It comes with
This is
additional self-winding pistol, it says in the description. And there's kind of
Yeah, I
Oh, I
saw
can
that.
imagine. I
a
can imagine.
screwdriver looking thing that's,
Yeah.
that's attached to it.
Yeah, some of these. That's not. Funnily enough, that's actually not the first time I hear that. Some of these watches, the design is so unique. It's so outré that to get it working, they just can't put a crown on the side. So yeah, there are these little keys that you use to drive. That's not the first time I hear that. Fascinating, fascinating. I mean, it's absolutely hideous, but I'd
Oh
love to
yeah,
see a
absolutely.
Bond
It's
movie.
not a good look at all.
No, but I'd love to see a Bond villain watch that. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. But which is why it needs to be on the wrist of a Bond villain.
My thoughts
It's
exactly.
amazing. It's amazing. It's like it's beautiful and it's disgusting. I love it.
So I'll go with the second pick. I mean,
Please.
so with my second pick, mine's a little less garish than that, but the reason I'm going to choose this watch is because I want the Bond villain to somewhat mirror the Bond himself, and I was thinking,
Mm.
so those of you guys know me, you guys know I love the show HBO show Succession a lot, and
Mhm.
my top choices for Bond villain for Bond 26 or 27 are Jeremy Strong from who plays Brian Cox's dipshit son in Succession,
Mhm.
or the actor who just played Elvis Presley in Elvis, Austin Butler. Because
Oh,
I think
interesting. Okay.
and the reason why, and even though they're two very different actors, but they're both very calculating people. With the type of acting that they portray, they're both very calculating people, and as a result, I want the villain for Bond 26 to wear the Tag Heuer Monaco that Steve McQueen wore.
Hmm.
Interesting.
That is a good choice. I
Interesting.
really do like the Tag Heuer line in general, but the Monaco more than the Carrera or the some of the other ones they make is a very interesting choice for a
That
square watch. I'm not big on square watches, but the Monaco is one of those square watches I would say very interesting.
and that is one of my dream watches because I love everything Steve McQueen, but I've always tried to find like good alternatives of it, and I found one from Festina, from the Spanish brand called Festina, and but I wasn't feeling a mood at the time. But like one day maybe, but right now I'm happy with my Hamiltons. But besides the point, like I think and Tag Heuer is one of my dream watches, and I want, as like I said, Bond villain is gonna be very secondary to Bond himself, so that's why
Mhm.
I chose this watch. And what I'll what Bond will sport himself will reflect will be not a reflection of the Tag Heuer Monaco, but something that's a
The Tag Heuer
competitive
Montreal.
Tag Heuer Montreal. It'll be something that's complementative to Bond himself. And Tag Heuer Monaco was not only worn by Steve McQueen, but was also worn by Bryan Cranston as Walter White in Breaking Bad.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There you go.
So
I like this a lot.
another calculating villain as well too. But
No, I like this one a lot. I've seen images. I can't. Some YouTuber visited the Tag Heuer. Why can I not think of the word? Factory. There you go. And obviously all these watch brands, when you visit their HQ, they have these sort of public museums, if you will. And yeah, I mean, the walls were just plastered of pictures of F1 cars and racing cars. It has that long, rich tradition of being associated with the vehicular racing, and the Monaco it's a really special, it's a special piece of watch. It's a beautiful thing. And like you, Emery, I'm not super hot on square. I don't mind rectangular. In fact, I own a Seiko Solar that's rectangular, but
Mhm.
square is I'm not too big on that. But if it's going to be the Monaco, yeah, I'm okay with that. Any other comments?
That's all I had at Edgar. With the final pick of the second round goes to Edgar Chapu for the Bond
Yes,
villain.
it does. It does. Now, of course, I don't know why my word closed on me. Now, for my villain, obviously, so clearly my villain deals in science, plant science, animal science, and his end game is very nefarious. So you might call him a bit of a freak. So mild spoilers. I'm going with the Ulysse Nardin Freak Vision 2505-250, which looks a little something like this. I'll send you guys another one. So this is so
Okay.
this essentially is the original version of the Freak came out in 2001, co-designed by someone that enjoyed astronomy. The reason why, and I remember texting you, Emery, in the lead up to this episode, that this was the first watch that came to mind when we agreed upon the draft. This I would kill to see a Bond villain wear this thing. As you can tell, there are no regular hands. If you look closely, it's a little
Right.
odd. My second image doesn't seem to want to go in there
Let's see.
properly.
It's very, very unique in how
Yeah, with the
the exposed gears, but at the same time, the minute and hour hands are
Well,
so large, but like
yes. Essentially, the white arrow, the big white arrow, is the hour hand. So that's our hour hand. So that's fairly simple. Where
mhm.
things get a little bit feckished up is in the rest. You are correct in assuming that that big monstrosity in the middle is it's the minute hand. The minute itself being the slightly more pointy side, whereas the slightly fatter edge is the larger part of the movement. So what happens is essentially the hand is on top of the movement, and it operates as its own tourbillon as it goes around the
Okay.
clock for an hour. So you see the movement, you tell the time, and you're sort of getting a tourbillon at the same time as well. So it's doing three things at the same time. The movement, and especially the double barrel escapement, is used as a silicon, and the Freak, the Ulysse Nardin Freak, obviously these days a bunch of watchmakers use silicon, but in 2001 the Freak was the first one to use
Right.
silicon. So you have
oh yeah,
that villain thinking like, I'm going to be cutting edge, I want to be the first. Twin escapement wheels, no crown. Where's the
Yeah.
crown? There is no crown. So how do you change the time? Notice on the image, or at least the one you guys can see, the image on the right hand side, there's a little flap. You lift that flap, and that's actually a little handle to turn the entire
No
mechanism, and
way.
thus, yeah,
oh wow.
it's really insane.
What
Um,
the? This is. I think we've really hit the nail on the head on uniqueness tonight because I wasn't expecting. Oh wow. Okay.
it's quite something.
Oh
It's big. It's a 45 millimeter watch, but it's the villain. He a big personality. And when it's fully ready to go, it's 7 days of power reserve. And I love the fact that it's 7 days of power reserve, not because I'm ever going to own a freak, but because my Bond villain doesn't have time to wake up in the morning and, rewind his watch. He has things to do. He has a world to dominate. So the watch is good to go for 7 days. So I thought that was a nice little bonus.
Oh,
They
nice.
do seem to make an automatic version of it too, because that's the original. Well, I looked at your image, but then I Googled it too. They do seem to make an automatic version of it, but like it's still super impressive of how the kind of like planetary gear movement of it is like semi-exposed, but it is really an interesting watch. Wow.
It's hey, my villain's a very interesting guy.
It is super weird. Wow, it's freaky.
The first time I heard of this thing, and I'm just sort of just Googling other variations of it, but the first time I heard of it, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was like a Mad Magazine type of a thing, and this is not a real watch. I mean, back in the day, I don't think I was fully aware that Ulysse Nardin was like a real thing. And they make things that are less complicated than this, but because they have in-house, they've hired very unique designers like this astrology lover. They sort of come up with these phantasmagorical beasts. So is it as completely off the wall as yours? No, I would still take it a notch below yours. Yours is just like, what in the world are we looking at? But
this one I would wear it though. Like this is something that would be wearable. It's still a conversation piece and it's wearable and functional. Whereas the Hublot hurts my eyes to try.
Hurts my eyes.
I mean, I just wanted. I was much less creative than you guys, but I just wanted something that will reflect the character.
But see, where Emery's villain is completely off the wall, my villain is a little bit eccentric and likes to be ostentatious. Your villain is iconic.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. And then with the final round, since you capped the final round, why don't you take the first overall pick for the leading man, James Bond himself?
Boys, I'm going to say this. I'm so happy we're doing this because we love watches so much. And now we get giving the leading ladies watch was a great joy. Giving our Bond villains watch was a great joy. But boys, we're about to give 007 his watch.
This is what we're here for, everyone.
This is, well, we didn't really want to say that, but sort of. So by the way, in my timeline, if listeners don't remember my fictional Bond 26, Dan Stevens is my Bond. So we're in that parallel universe. I haven't recast him yet. He's not George Lazenby. He's not one and done. So I needed to combine a few things for Bond. 3 things were excessively important for me in dressing Bond's wrist. Number 1, he's a former naval officer. So obviously there has to be a heritage of the sea, maritime, water resistance. So there needs to be a bit of a diver watch vibe going on. Number 2 is, as most modern Bond movies do, 007 doesn't stay at the same place for the whole film. He goes to 3 or 4 places. So I needed either a world timer, maybe a GMT, something that was functional for someone like Bond. And number 3, and I feel this quite deeply. I'm actually quite passionate about this subject, but I know because of current licensing deals that are in place, and I have so much love for Omega. But the thing I'm very passionate about, because of the current licensing deal in place, it can't happen. I think Bond should wear. I think. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. I don't know why my image is frozen, but anyways, I think Bond should wear a British watch. So I went with the Christopher Ward C65 Aquitaine GMT. Here is Dan Stevens as 007 in Bond 27. This is his watch. Christopher Ward are fairly new on the block. They've only been around since
Oh, wow.
2004,
Mm-hmm.
founded by
Oh,
three
wow.
people, among
'Cause
them
I got-
Christopher Ward.
Because I remember a lot of Bond fans talked about this on social media. I didn't know, like, I always thought this was like a startup watch company, but kind of is. But go on.
So essentially, they're a British brand that's been around for not quite 20 years, but they've really risen in the ranks very quickly. In fact, just a few weeks ago, at the time of this recording, which is the middle of November 2022, they've actually released their first tourbillon watch. But they're still, well, at least in comparison to other brands, they're still relatively affordable. If you look at the images I shared with the Aquatine, it has 200 meters of water resistance. You have your unidirectional bezel, and there is also a GMT hand. It's also a traveler's GMT, by which I mean the GMT hand can be independently adjusted and you're not messing up with the local hour, which is something you don't always get with GMTs.
My watch has that.
I think that's the most brilliant invention. It's a domed, and now we really get into. I really thought about James Bond's watch. I really wanted to get this right. You have a domed sapphire crystal, so you just get a touch of deformation depending on the angle. You know, depending on what angle you're looking at it, the dial looks a little bit funky, which is what will sometimes happen with those domed sapphire crystals. So there's a bit of a vintage vibe. You have a trident seconds hand, so again, that naval heritage. And the colorization, the black dial, with that sort of full patined marker color. It's a tool watch, but still an old school, handsome style. It's just passable enough for formal wear. So I need a GMT for traveling. I needed water resistance for the naval heritage. I needed British. It's a 41 millimeter watch, 56 hours power reserve. But James Bond is a very detail-oriented person, so he doesn't mind getting his watch ready every few days, even though it's only 56 hours. And there you go. So the Christopher Ward Aquatine C65.
That is a handsome looking watch. That really is a good looking watch.
Oh, Jan Stevens is a handsome looking man.
Yeah.
You know what? He's a decent selection for Bond. I've seen him in other works. He was really great in Legion, really limited series he did on Fox as Professor X's lesser known son. But anyway, that's a story for another day. If you don't mind, Jason, I'll go next.
Yeah, of course. I was going to select you as the second overall.
All right, perfect. I went in a completely, not a completely different direction. This is going to be a technically a Bond brand because we do see it in a former movie, but there was never really any licensing to it. But the watch itself that I chose, I wanted to go with a vintage watch. So this would possibly and probably not be Bond's main watch, but this was kind of a personal watch, let's just say. It is the Breitling AVI reference 765 with the digital 15-minute countdown window.
Oh, okay.
So this is I'm gonna put the because I didn't save my photos, but I've got the link, and sorry, I'm on 3 screens, so it's all messed up. So it's a black faced watch. It's a chronograph, but instead of the date window, it's a countdown timer. And so this countdown timer was used by the Air Force to count down as a pre-flight check. So you would have a 15-minute countdown in that little window. And I thought that Bond would probably enjoy it for other tasks that he thinks that he can efficiently accomplish in 15 minutes, and not necessarily for its flight capabilities. It's a feature that was made as a standard for the French Air Force around that time, and I just thought it was an overall more interesting watch than going with, because originally I was thinking the Amiga. Not the Speedmaster chronograph and
interesting, really,
and a vintage one. So I was going in that. So why don't we just kind of go a little bit to the side and go with a brand that we see in Thunderball? The top time is there, and I believe there's
you're right.
another.
Yeah.
There's the top time that turns into the Geiger counter, but there's another top time that he wears briefly in the movie. And I figured, well, these are really great looking watches, and this kind of is one of those watches that's unique enough that.
What is the 15-minute countdown? Is that the one on the left?
It's the window. Instead of being a date, it's the countdown timer is there.
Oh,
that
is
and
so
that portion
cool.
is digital. That portion is not mechanical. That portion itself is digital.
Oh, okay. No, great choice. I mean, I know some people didn't like the look, but I personally like the look of the Breitling in Thunderball. It was a cool watch. No, this is a good.
Oh yeah.
It has a dial, and the dial you've kind of like you've got the minutes on the very inside edge of the watch face, and then you've got the larger numbers, but then you've got the exterior dial that also has the hours on them. So I thought that was just overall the look of the watch was quite different than what you would see on a regular diver.
It almost works as that could almost work as a GMT, I guess, or a dual time. I mean, a GMT, you need the hand for a GMT, but a dual time.
Right, exactly.
That is a brilliant watch. I've never seen this before. Thank you, Emery, for this.
Oh, this is really cool.
I'm glad that we're really hitting it out of the park with these picks, everyone. I mean, I think I'm glad that there's nothing redundant and repetitive.
Well, there won't be nothing redundant because mine's not that. But go ahead, Edgar.
No, but what's going on is that we're coming up with reasons. I mean, we picked watches other than maybe the Ferrari, but we picked watches that we like, that we would wear. But even if they're fugly, like the blue, there's a reason why the Bond villain is wearing it. So I think we're not just coming up with cool watches, we're coming up with cool reasons why our characters are wearing these. And the fact that I absolutely love the fact that you said it's not a date window, it's a 15-minute counter, and Bond can use that for tasks. That's the 7.
I'm thinking the Fleming way. I think if Fleming had come across this watch, he would write it into the novel of having it used for Bond to use with it.
Fascinating. Well, we only have one Bond watch left. What is Jason's 007 going to wear?
So this, I had the honor of being the Mr. Irrelevant of the James Bond complex watch draft. That, for our dear listeners who are not familiar with the NFL draft, Mr. Irrelevant is the last pick of the NFL draft on the draft day, of the last pick of the final round. And I decided to I decided to still stick with the Bond brand itself. And if you guys remember, this was a watch that was going to be complementary to Jeremy Strong or Austin Butler's villain wearing the Tag Heuer Monaco. I chose a chronograph for Bond because we've only seen Bond wear chronograph twice in the entire series. On Her Majesty's when he's doing the timing the cable car, and then Roger wears a Seiko white dial, and what is it? A View to a Kill.
View to a Kill, yeah.
And then, I mean, for our dear list, and then I guess the Breitling was not a chronograph, but it had the two. Anyway, so I'm not saying my Bond movie will be racing involved. I mean, there will be Formula One or racing in it, but that's not going to be the theme of the movie. And the reason why I chose a chronograph is because I think there could be some interesting gadgets that could be used. And for those of you guys who know me, my choices for Bond actors right now are Richard Madden or Nicholas Hoult, who himself is a very Nicholas Hoult, who is a very well trained racing driver himself. Like he actually is like he actually races Ferraris and motorcycles on his free time. And I mean, this is not the discussion for why I think Nicholas Hoult should be James Bond, but the watch I would uh, sport on Nicholas Hoult, James Bond, or even Richard Madden would be. I'm going to stick with the Bond brand itself. It's the Omega Bullhead Seamaster Bullhead chronograph.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
And then I'll type it into the thing right here. And this watch was worn by Daniel Craig at the British Silverstone Grand Prix, which was the 1007th Formula One race ever, and he wore that watch at the pits of the Red Bull team, the Red Bull pit stop, and
that's a Seamaster. Wow.
It's technically Seamaster brand, and I really like the bullhead feature. And I've been trying to look for good bullhead watches, and Citizen makes a couple bullheads, but I don't really like theirs. And the reason why I chose the bullhead is not because, it's not just because like there will be racing in my Bond 26 or 27, but also in the summer of 2019 was when the movie Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out, and Brad Pitt's character Rick Dalton. I really loved his character a lot. I thought he was a complete badass, and that's what I want Bond to be. And Brad Pitt's character wore a Citizen bullhead chronograph. I like the old ones better than the new ones. But it had the double wrap leather band. I don't know what they're called. So if someone correct me, someone or listeners, feel free to correct me. But so I wanted both, not just to complement the Tag Heuer Monica, but I was just so inspired by Brad Pitt's character Rick Dalton, and I was like, I just want Bond to just be like a wisecracking, just badass and beat the shit out of people, and while like cursing them out. Or, like I still remember the scene where, hey, speaking of which, Austin Butler himself was in that movie, where he's the guy who, he's the character where, he's the what is it, the Charles Manson cult character in which Brad Pitt throws the can into his face.
Right.
That was him. He's like, what's your name? He's like, I'm the devil. And he's like, no, your name is Tex. And the girl's like, Rex, shoot him. And he's like, that's right, your name is Rex. And then he throws the freaking the dog food can right into his face. I was like, this, and that's what I want out of a Bond, is I just want him to just be complete badass, wisecracking, and sociopathic. And I was inspired by Rick. Bond is a sociopath. There's no like a
functioning sociopath. The functioning sociopath.
High functioning sociopath alcoholic. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's exactly what I picture Bond to be, as well as wisecracking jokes. And so that's why I wanted Bond to wear a bullhead just like Rick Dalton, and nothing better than the Omega. Going back to the Bond brand itself, the Omega Seamaster bullhead.
What is that second crown protruding from the bottom? I suppose the one from the top is to adjust the hour. What is that thing at the bottom?
But if it's a Seamaster, wouldn't that be?
The escape valve.
No. So the bottom valve. So unlike other diver watches, the bezel is inside the watch. So the bottom dial is to rotate the bezel.
The bezel, okay. So there's no release valve. There's a crown, and then there's one for rotating the. Oh wow, that's an interesting design feature.
Because I've seen a lot of pilot watches or racing watches in which there is a second crown to rotate bezels. Hamilton has some too, but like when I looked at this watch I just fell in love with this watch.
That's very complicated to make, especially if something that's going to go under the water, because that needs an extra gasket, that little disc gasket. It's an interesting complication. Very interesting complication.
So I do not have the gadget features yet, but the reason I chose the bullhead was to complement both the villains, Tag Heuer Monica, as well as to take inspiration from Brad Pitt's Rick Dalton, the stuntman in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, maybe Brad Pitt will be playing Bond.
Well, I think that this is probably the most successful draft in recent history, seeing as how the NFL and NHL and MLB drafts have all been relatively unsuccessful for a lot of people. This one seems to have put together not only some fabulous picks, but some interesting new discoveries. Let's just say.
Our Bond movies are probably terrible, but come and see the watches, though.
Yeah.
On point. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting these messages again. They're coming from Mr. Montblanc. Is that White Mountain?
I got a message from my Fitbit as well too. This Fitbit sent message.
Oh my goodness, he got into your Fitbit.
Yeah, and he asked me, Mr. International Man of Mystery, Senor Kim, do you see people everywhere?
We do have people everywhere, wouldn't you agree, Mr. Montblanc? For example, we are on Facebook, search for the James Bond Complex. We're on Instagram, search for @the James Bond Complex. There's a YouTube page, search for the same name, subscribe and tickle us with the thumbs up button. If you coochie coochie coo, that's all we do at the complex. We just do coochie coochie coo.
Tickle fight.
Right.
That's another episode.
That the Tickles of Bond is coming up next week. Thank you. Merci sur ce. If you enjoy this, obviously this will be on YouTube, but there will be an MP3. Presumably there's going to be at least an MP3 version.
Absolutely.
And you can listen to that at anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Pod. Oh, I should save Apple Podcasts for the end, but too late. Google Podcasts. But Apple are my friends. Search for the James Bond Complex. Subscribe. Write a review. Tell us what you think James Bond, the lead villain, and the leading lady should wear in an upcoming movie. And leave us a 5-star glowing golden gun review. Emery, try to make this episode appear on time.
Tempus Fugit, my friend.
Tempus Fugit. Jason Bond, I think you're on Instagram, right?
I am on Instagram at JASXON88. And to conclude the 60th Diamond Jubilee of the James Bond phenomenon, there will be a couple more posts from myself that will be related to Fleming film and everything in between.
Ooh. So exciting.
And before we conclude, I made a mistake on my part on the episode. So the girl in the Once Upon a Time gets hit with the can. Austin Butler's character gets bit with the dog. I got them two mixed up. In case if anyone comes and corrects us, just stay for the PS.
Right.
I'm sure they'll come after us for the horrible watch selection that I made for the villain, but
that is an interesting one. That your picks were quite interesting. Well, they were all interesting, but you blew me away with that one, the Ferrari.
La Ferrari. Et sur ça, mes amis, bonne soirée.
Bien, merci, toujours un plaisir. À la prochaine, hasta la próxima. And what's the other one? A domani, hasta la próxima. Ciao belli.
들어줘서 감사합니다. 안녕히 계세요. 아리가토 마타네.